The police are now asking people to go through all of their footage, dash cam footage, door cam footage, anything that can help them identify who might be responsible, particularly people who live in Loughton or in Enfield.
It didn't start with a shooting or a chase. It started with silence and a white Audi parked neatly on a quiet North London street. On the surface, nothing seemed wrong, but inside, a man who'd once been the voice of a community was missing. DJ Koray, real name Mehmet Koray Alpagin, was a well-known figure in London's Turkish community. Charismatic, warm, and outspoken. He ran a popular radio station, hosted events, and never shied away from speaking his mind. But in October 2022, he vanished. No warning, no explanation. Just an abandoned car, no driver, no sign of him or his girlfriend. The night before, he'd been out for dinner in Mayfair. It was meant to be a simple night out. But when they left the restaurant, a white van was waiting. Inside, masked men. The couple were ambushed, taken, and driven across the city. Koray wouldn't be seen again until his naked body was discovered in Essex woodland. Tortured, burned, beaten. His girlfriend survived, locked in a toilet for 2 days. And when she escaped, the truth came with her. This wasn't random, it was calculated, organized, brutal. This is the story of DJ Koray's final hours and the men who thought they could get away with murder. He thought the night was over. Full stomach, good mood, the city lights of Mayfair glowing behind him. Koray had been smiling as they walked out, hand in hand with Ghost, chatting, calm, unaware that a van was already trailing their steps. They didn't notice it at first, no reason to. It wasn't rushing, it wasn't close, but it never turned away. He drove the white Audi north. Familiar streets, nothing out of the ordinary. They pulled into Ebony Crescent, a quiet residential patch in Enfield. He parked neatly, shut the engine off. One last stretch before home. But they never made it through the door. As soon as the car stopped, the van did too. No headlights, no noise, just masked men jumping out and moving fast. The Audi doors were yanked open, no time to react. Koray was forced out first, hands grabbed, head down. Gosde was screaming. One of the men held her back. Another wrapped her head in fabric. Both of them were shoved into the back of the van. Then it was gone. No shots, no shouts, just silence. The Audi sat there, untouched. The street went back to sleep. The next morning, neighbors walked past it. Nothing looked wrong. The car was clean, locked, still. Koray's phone had stopped pinging around midnight. Gosde's hadn't moved since. Calls went unanswered, texts left unread, but nobody thought the worst. Not yet. Maybe they'd just stayed out. Maybe the phones had died. By the end of that day, the worry had started. Friends were posting on Instagram asking if anyone had seen him. Gosde's family hadn't heard from her either, and still no one called the police. It wasn't until the next day, 48 hours later, that the first report was made, but by then, it wasn't a missing persons case anymore. It was something else entirely. Because while people were still hoping for a misunderstanding, Koray was already dead. His body dumped in the woods, burned, stripped, left like rubbish. And Gosde, still alive, just trapped in a wine bar basement near Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, locked in a toilet, bleeding, disoriented, waiting. The only reason anyone would find her was because she found the strength to escape. Wearing only a coat that wasn't hers, she stumbled out of the darkness, through a side door, onto a street she didn't recognize, then into a restaurant next door. The staff thought she was drunk, maybe on something. But then they saw the bruises, the blood, the look in her eyes. They killed him, she said. They hurt him so bad. By the time police got there, the building was empty. The men were gone. But what they'd left behind would tell the story, brick by brick. Because buried beneath the floor of that wine bar was a torture room. And the evidence inside it would reveal what Koray went through before he died. The wine bar looked normal from the outside. Stadium lounge, dark windows, cheap branding. Just another small venue near the football ground. A place for drinks, music, match nights. Nothing special, nothing suspicious. But inside it was different. Downstairs, past the staff area, there was a toilet. And beside that, a storage space. Hidden, sealed. No one ever questioned it. No one ever opened it. That's where they kept Koray. He was stripped naked, hands bound, locked in the dark. Gosdi could hear it through the wall, the shouting, the hitting, the sound of something solid, metal maybe, slamming against bone. They didn't want money, they wanted pain. Over 2 days, Koray was tortured, not just beaten, destroyed. He was burned, stabbed, scalded with boiling water. A baseball bat was used on his legs. Police would later call it a sustained and brutal assault. But even that didn't come close. It wasn't rage, it was routine. The men behind it worked in silence. No shouting, no panic, just methodical punishment. Like they'd done it before, like they knew exactly how far they could go. They gave Gosda water, bread, left her locked in the toilet. She could barely move, but she could hear everything, every cry, every impact, every moment he was alive. And then nothing, no more screams, just a silence. When she finally found a way out, her voice was the only thing that remained. She told detectives everything, the van, the men, the room, the sound of his last breaths. And when police searched the bar, it all lined up. Blood on the floor, tape, burn marks, tools, DNA. It wasn't just a holding site, it was a chamber. They'd brought Koray there on purpose. They knew the route, they knew the building, they knew the layout, and they thought the basement would keep their secrets. They were wrong. Forensics confirmed it. The room had been prepared, wiped down before, set up with restraints, even noise insulation in the walls. But the men weren't finished yet. They still had a body to get rid of, and they had one more van. So while Gosde sat behind that locked door, Koray's body was taken, driven miles outside the city, dumped in Essex woodland like trash. When a dog walker found him, he was barely recognizable, naked, burned, his body left under leaves, face down, cold. But they hadn't counted on the escape. They hadn't counted on Gosd surviving, and they hadn't counted on her remembering their faces. Because once her story was out, the whole thing started to fall apart. The moment Gosdi spoke, everything changed. She gave the police names, descriptions, the van, the bar, where they went, what she heard. Her voice was trembling, her body still in shock, but her memory was clear. She remembered one man's build, another's voice, a pair of shoes, a London accent, a cough, the way they moved. It was enough. Police swarmed the stadium lounge. What they found confirmed everything. Blood, duct tape, a scorched floor, the stench of bleach that hadn't worked. CCTV from a nearby street caught the white van arriving, then leaving again hours later. Inside it, 3 men, all hooded, all careful, but not careful enough. The van was traced to a hire company, fake name, false ID, but one fingerprint left on the doorframe matched someone already in the system, Dylan Weatherly, just 20 years old, a petty criminal, known to police for thefts, driving offenses, and drugs. Nothing like this, nothing even close. He was picked up days later in Tottenham, denied everything, claimed he didn't know Koray, said he'd never seen the girl. But the forensics told a different story. His prints were on the tape, his boot mark on the floor, DNA on a discarded cloth. He wasn't alone. Another name came up fast, Kyrie Mitchell Pert, 33, more experience, linked to gangs in North London, charged in the past with possession, robbery, resisting arrest. CCTV placed him near the bar that night. His phone data matched Gosdi's timeline. He'd driven the second van, the one that dumped the body. When police knocked on his door, he didn't run, just opened it. Stood there, silent, calm, like it didn't matter. Inside, they found burner phones, cash, clothes matching Gosdi's statement, and a set of car keys, keys that belonged to the same white van used in the kidnapping. And then there was a third man, Isai Stoyanov, older, 44, Bulgarian. No obvious connection to Koray, no link to the radio scene, but he was tied to the bar. His prints were all over the cellar. His name was linked to property records. One officer described him as the cleaner, not in the domestic sense, but the criminal one. Stoyanov claimed he knew nothing, said he was just maintaining the bar, didn't ask questions, just did what he was paid for. But police weren't buying it. He'd helped cover the blood, he'd helped remove the evidence, he was part of the machine. And by now, all 3 men were in custody. But the problem was bigger. The deeper police dug, the more they saw that this wasn't just 3 men acting alone. There were signs of something broader, something structured, the kind of violence they used, the way they moved, the coldness, the planning. It wasn't random. Detectives suspected this wasn't just a murder, it was a message, and they were just scratching the surface. And by the time the trial began, the story had already gone public. Newspapers were calling it one of the most horrific killings in recent memory. A radio DJ abducted, tortured, and murdered. A girlfriend left for dead. And 3 men now facing justice. The courtroom was full. Reporters, family members, even strangers who had followed the headlines. Everyone wanted to understand why, but the answers wouldn't come easy. The prosecution was led by Crispin Aylett K.C. Calm, measured, and brutal in detail. He laid it out for the jury. Mehmet Koray Alpagin had been lured, followed, abducted in broad daylight and taken to a building that had been prepared for torture. He had been held for 2 days. There were 94 injuries on his body. Scalding, beatings, deep cuts, his face so badly bruised that even his own family struggled to identify him. The motive? According to Aylett, it came down to ego and humiliation, a grudge, a power play. Koray had apparently angered someone connected to serious organized crime, possibly with ties to Turkey, possibly over money, possibly over something he said. But the details were vague. What was clear, these 3 men played their part in carrying out a planned, precise, and horrific punishment. Dylan Weatherly, the youngest, sat quietly in the dock. The court heard he had helped kidnap Koray and Gozd. He had driven the van, he had restrained them, he had been in the basement, his DNA was everywhere. Mitchell Pert, they said, was the one who orchestrated the logistics, the vans, the route, the drop site in Essex. He wasn't just a driver, he was a fixer. And Stoyanov? The prosecution called him the facilitator, the one who made the space available, the one who cleaned the blood, the one who knew where the bleach was kept and when to use it. All 3 denied murder, but there was a twist because no one had actually been charged with murder. Instead, the Crown Prosecution Service had gone for something else, manslaughter. The injuries, while horrific, didn't show a single fatal blow. No knife wound to the heart, no gunshot, just accumulated trauma, a death by overwhelming, sustained violence. So they aimed to prove a joint enterprise that together these men created the conditions that led to Koray's death. And that was enough. Gozdi took the stand, shaking, quiet, but firm. She told the jury what she'd heard, what she saw, what they did to her, how she was kept locked in the toilet, how she escaped, how Koray had screamed for her to stay quiet until he didn't scream anymore. The courtroom was silent. You could hear people breathing. By the end of her testimony, even the judge looked shaken. The defense tried to pull it apart. Weatherly's lawyers claimed he was a pawn, used by older men, scared into compliance. Mitchell Pert's team argued he was just a driver, no idea what was happening inside. Stoyanov claimed language barriers, said he didn't know a crime had taken place until it was too late. But the evidence didn't lie. Photos, texts, GPS logs, DNA, witness accounts, everything pointed in one direction. They were all involved, and now they were all exposed. When the verdicts came down, the room held its breath. All 3 men guilty, not of murder, but manslaughter, guilty of kidnap, guilty of false imprisonment, guilty of taking part in something so violent, so degrading, that even seasoned officers struggled to speak about it without emotion. There was no celebration in the courtroom, just silence, numb relief. And for Koray's loved ones, a grief that didn't lift, because no sentence would bring him back. But the judge didn't hold back. Mr. Justice Bryan stood, looked each man in the eye, and laid it bare. You subjected Mehmet Koray Alpagin to the most dreadful violence over a prolonged period, he said. It was calculated, sustained, and beyond inhumane. You intended to break him. You treated him as disposable. He turned to Weatherly, 22 years old now, and said, you may have been the youngest, but you knew what you were doing. Then Mitchell Pert, 34, called central to the entire operation. And finally, Stoyanov, 44. You tried to cover the blood with bleach. You scrubbed a floor that would never come clean. The sentences: Mitchell Pert, 22 years in prison. Weatherly, 21 years. Stoyanov, 19 years. Each one showed little emotion as they were led away. Outside the court, reporters gathered like vultures. The headlines were instant. 3 men jailed after horrific torture killing of DJ Koray. Kidnap seller horror, radio host's final days. Tortured in a wine bar, so for what? But beneath the sensationalism, something more uncomfortable was growing, because questions still hadn't been answered. Who ordered it? What was Koray mixed up in? Why did a community icon, a man with no violent record, end up the victim of something so calculated? The police had theories. Maybe Koray knew something he wasn't supposed to. Maybe he was seen talking to the wrong people. Maybe someone wanted to send a message, loud and brutal, but nothing had been proven. No one higher up had been named. And for some, that was the most terrifying part. Because if this was only 3 men acting on someone else's command, then the real danger was still out there, still watching, still silent. For Gozda, life would never be the same. She relocated, cut ties, stopped posting on social media. The girl who once shared pictures of restaurants and sunsets now lived in the shadows of memory. She had survived. But every night in that toilet stayed with her. The banging, the screams, the smell of bleach, the final silence. As for Koray, his community mourned him in thousands. There were vigils, candles, a full funeral in North London. His radio station played his favorite sets on loop. Callers cried live on air. Hosts who once laughed with him now struggled to speak. They hadn't just lost a DJ, they'd lost a voice, a leader, a friend. And behind all of it, a single question remained: who really wanted him dead? Months have passed, the headlines have faded, the court transcripts filed, the prison gates closed, but the pain hasn't gone anywhere. Koray's name still echoes in London's Turkish community. His old radio station still runs tribute sets. Every year on the anniversary of his death, the messages flood in. We miss you. Justice wasn't enough. They didn't act alone. Because that's the part that still haunts everyone, the feeling that this case was only half solved. The court named 3 men, but the crime was too big, too cold, too structured. People whisper about a bigger group, a network, that Koray had crossed someone important, maybe in Turkey, maybe in London, that he was warned, that he knew something, that his abduction wasn't just punishment but prevention. Police never confirmed it, but they never denied it either. Even in court, the prosecution hinted at it. This was not a spontaneous attack. This was organized. This was targeted. And what about the building? Stadium Lounge has since shut its doors. The wine bar is empty now. No customers, no events, just a darkened property on the edge of Tottenham. But what happened in that basement? It left a mark. Locals say the place feels cursed. The walls still smell of bleach. And though it's changed owners, no one seems to want it. Like everyone knows what it once was, like the air won't let it go. For Gozdi, the trauma runs deeper than any sentence. She gave everything to the investigation, told her story, faced them in court, but she lives with what she heard in that room, the final sounds of a man she loved, begging, breaking, dying. There are no more interviews, no photos, no statements. She has disappeared from the public eye, leaving only the memory of the girl who survived something no one should ever have to. And for the rest of London, it served as a brutal reminder this city has layers. There are things happening underground, quietly, invisibly. People get followed. Buildings hide things, and sometimes the people who seem safest are already being watched. Koray wasn't a gangster. He wasn't a threat. He was a voice on the radio. And yet he was targeted, tortured, erased. Not because he was part of the underworld, but because he brushed too close to it. That's what made the case so chilling. It wasn't about money, it wasn't about revenge, it was about silence, control, fear. The message was clear. This is what happens when you step out of line. But in the end, the message backfired. Because instead of silence, people spoke. Instead of fear, the community stood up. And instead of vanishing into history, Koray's name now lives on. In court records, in headlines, in hearts. He thought it was just another dinner. He didn't know it would be his last night alive. But the men who killed him, and the ones who might have ordered it, will never forget his name. Mehmet Koray Alpagin. A DJ, a voice, a victim, and a symbol of a case that still sends shivers through the streets of London.